Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of WHU Inside Business. I'm your host, Mazur, and with me I've got a very exciting guest, Sunny Nakra. And today we're going to be talking about sales, marketing, entrepreneurship, and of course, Sunny's achievements to date. Sunny, obviously I can go into some length talking about your background, but I think it's always a fantastic pleasure to hear it from you directly yourself.Uld you like to introduce yourself to our audience real quick?
Absolutely, Dan. Well, thanks for having me on. So today I'm going to be chatting a little bit about, again, the process and journey of entrepreneurship. And I really want to focus on the authentic side of just being an entrepreneur. And you don't have to be anyone crazy, but you got to take it step by step and enjoy the process. So I hope if you're watching this, you leave with something today that can help you thread the needle, whether it's in your career or taking something that can help you start your next business or your journey. But first and foremost, so I originally started in the sales and marketing side of things back in university. And I know a lot of people who are watching this are currently in university. And essentially I started with just doing entry-level sales jobs. I learned different things. So I worked at Foot Locker, a Bell corporate store. So it's a phone communication company here in Canada. And then I shifted on to actually working for Volkswagen in automotive sales, and then shifted door to door in Alberta. So those of you that don't know it, it's quite a process of getting from the foundation of sales into learning, the intricacies of sales. And I think sales and marketing, one and the same, is how you brand yourself and how you present yourself to the world ultimately. So started in 2017. My sales journey started in 2014, but entrepreneurship started in 2017.
That's fascinating. Why don't we jump in a little bit more into the sales and marketing aspects? I mean, as you rightly say, sales as a career is full of little steps, which seem like one big step, but when you're doing it, obviously there's quite a lot more to it. Why don't you perhaps share some of the secrets of the industry that you've learned whilst being a practitioner yourself?
Definitely. Are we looking for like sales tips and advice, or are we looking for more so the process throughout it?
Both. I think it's really interesting for our audience in terms of specific advice we can take into, say, negotiation, management, consulting, but also actually when we're taking it from a macro perspective and think about sales as a career, it's not necessarily something that everyone would consider with a university background. So I'd love to get your take on both.
100%. Sales is very delicate, and as traditionally sales has a very negative connotation. When people think of a salesperson, they think of sleazy or whatever terms may come with it. Now that's just the reality of it. But when it comes to sales, and the difference between a good and a great salesperson is, one, to listen. You want to prospect, qualify, you want to understand your clients or consumers' needs and wants and be able to fulfill that. Essentially, instead of just forcing a product to somebody, what you want to do is you want to lead them towards the direction that they're really looking for. So ultimately, in the back of my head, it's resonating and relating with who you're speaking to. And number two is really just asking a lot of questions to understand their needs and wants. And it's as simple as that, because the more questions you ask, Dan, ultimately, the more that they're learning, or more that you're learning, but more that you're uncovering about that person, right? Whether it's lifestyle needs, what they like, what they don't like, their need for that product or service, the experience that they're looking for. And ultimately, you're able to, provide that solution to them, hitting all what we call their hotkeys. So ultimately, as long as you relate, it's really important. You need to like the company, you need to like the person, and you need to like the product or service. If you can hit all three of those on why somebody should buy for you, the sale should be fairly seamless.
But it's interesting you mentioned that, because it's obviously a high degree of empathy you need to have to be able to relate, to really understand your counterpart. But also depends on your product at the end of the day. Have you been in a situation where you decided to walk away from a sale because it just didn't feel right to you?
100%. And that happens in automotive sales all the time, right? So, for example, I had an elder gentleman that came in for, a $40,000-$50,000 Mercedes, and he didn't understand the product or service. It had too many bells and whistles he was looking for. And ultimately, it's like, do you really need this? What about this? I know that you're looking for like a premium brand, and I know that we love our German engineering, but what if we take a look at a B series, something that's a little bit more simpler, has the bells and whistles you're looking for, but isn't, it's $10,000 to $20,000 less, right? So again, it's really uncovering and leading them into a direction to hit what they want, but they don't need all the bells and whistles just because you can make slightly more. It's about being ethical. So you really have to understand the value that that person is receiving. Is it additional value, or is it, you have to look at the marginal returns would be the best way to say it, right? Is that extra dollar that you're making worth the cost of, bearing that they're going to face, right? So really understanding that.
No, absolutely. I think that this ethical way of doing business is going to become more and more important, at least hopefully in the 21st century. And as far as I understand, it's also something that really motivated you to a degree to go into that entrepreneurial route. Why didn't you tell us a little bit more? How did you get into entrepreneurship to begin with? Tell us about your journey and really where you are with it right now.
So luckily for me, I grew up in the automotive industry where I was surrounded by business owners my whole life. And I always realized from a young age that, if you want what other people, have, you need to do, or don't have, you need to do things that people won't do, right? Like you need to be completely different. So in 2015, which was my second year of university, I had a friend of mine reach out and he wanted to start a company called Do Good. Now, essentially, the premise of Do Good was a concept where we sold clothing, and based off of every single sale, we gave 15% back to a charity of the consumer's choice. So, for example, Dan, give me an organization that you really care deeply about.
Oh, hard to pick. A social justice focused one or just any?
Anything.
Let's take Mercedes. I like my Mercedes.
Okay. So, using that and understanding that, what we would do is we'd give 15% back to that charity that you really admired, which means not only did you get to wear something that you liked, but you also felt and you took pride of giving back to something that was so near and dear to your heart. So that's how I originally got in the field. From there, it shifted. We ran into some legal battles with the company of the US.
Sure.
They said they were established longer than we were, and I was just too young to really take that risk and fight for what I thought was right. I literally backed off because they were a giant. I was like, okay, no worries. And I started a company called Atreo. So Atreo was the true root of my entrepreneurship journey and what it is today. It started as a clothing company, shifted from clothing company. I ran an event to market the product, so the clothing, and through that event, we ended up making $2,000-3,000 in one night. So I realized, I was like, okay, well, I can make $10 a shirt, or I can make a few $1,000s a night. What am I going to choose?
Sure.
So I shifted in the hospitality marketing industry, and I did that, and I actually forced a competitor in that field out of business because of how well we were doing. And ultimately, we ended up doing monthly to weekly in the hospitality sector. And then when COVID hit, after a few years, we realized it was time to shift. After about a month and then 2 months, we're like, okay, well, what does the industry really look like? And as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to adapt. Adaptability is the one thing that I want everyone to take from this today. And essentially, what we had to do is I had to figure out a way. Well, if hospitality wasn't going to be there and we didn't know what the opportunity or foreseeable future looked like, well, it's time to use that marketing knowledge and shift and help small businesses. Again, you need to look where there's a need and where you can fulfill that demand. So essentially, we started doing small business marketing and went from a Atreo Entertainment to a Atreo Media. With the Atreo Media, we had a team of 12. The overhead was quite high. So again, doing everything in Canada, wages, etc., were fairly high.
Sure.
And over time, about a year and a half, we work with restaurants, commercial, and then found real estate. And real estate was our gold mine because one client could lead to such a huge ROI for our client. So they were willing to invest the marketing dollars in order to receive that. But again, what we found is we're trading our time for money, which means, again, you're not unable to automate that process. So as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, you're doing everything in that industry until you get to a point where you can automate the business, take a step back and allow your processes to make money for you. So again, adaptability and learning that. So in February of 2022, so this is actually about 3 months ago, I acquired Atreo Media off my partner. Essentially, what I changed the business model from full service marketing, and I developed a software or product for $45 a month for realtors with a low overhead cost, but now I can target 1,000 or 2,000 realtors, which means it's now a business that's scalable, also that can be automated because the overhead and the development costs are low, which means I can do it once and target 1,000 people, right? So you're not trading time for money at that point. What you're doing is you're building processes to increase efficiency, and I hope that's something that a lot of people take, because being an entrepreneur, you need to learn the accounting, you need to learn the marketing, you need to learn the business development side, you need to learn the sales side, you need to learn customer service. At the end of the day, there's so many different encompassing parts to it that yes, you can do it all to begin with, but you need to learn to take a step back and allow the expert in each field to help you, right? Like you can't do everything. So that's one of the biggest things. That's kind of the entrepreneurship endeavor. It went from clothing to hospitality to now marketing. And then we automated that business after 4 years or 5 years. So we started in 2017, the Atreo brand, and it's shifted. It still has different components, but all throughout, I know we've tried a lot about social responsibility. We give back almost every single month to different organizations within the community to help build the community ties. So not only do we have community ties, student ties, but we also have business ties, which makes us very, very strong.
No, it's fascinating how you built that up. I think it's two aspects I really want to explore here. One, the business side, which, as you rightly articulate, you went from completely different industry, completely different customers, that to learn business models, to now software. With scalability in mind, what's next on your agenda? How are you going to further grow the business?
So it's a great question. I think in terms of scalability, there's a lot of different advertising and marketing fields that we're doing. I see this being the final evolution of Atreo Media. Essentially, there's one realtor every 55 people in Canada, and it's a market that I have the monopoly in Canada. There's two competitors in the US, but it's US related content. So because of real estate rules, etc., that content, sure, is able to be used here, but provides more additional work for a realtor in Canada. So my job and my opportunity right now is how can I take that and take majority of the market in Canada?
Yeah.
Now, in the future, you could see things like webinars, private training classes, courses, things like that, all built into this platform, hypothetically. But as of right now, it's to make an impact and contribution. And that's hotkey number 2 or 3 that you'll take from today is, as someone who is doing the things they do, one, you need to understand your why, but your question is, how am I impacting and how am I contributing? So impact and contribution are one of the most important things for anybody when it comes to doing the things that they do, right? And that's the reason why I do the things I do. So, for example, Niklas, right? He is a family member of mine, but I saw him grow up from a very young age. Now, for me, I want to be able to build that impact, and I want to be able to be that role model. That way, I will be able to see him develop over the years, and he's learning things that you should do and you shouldn't do, right? But again, there's a right and wrong way to do everything, and this is where I go back to being ethical within business.
And let's pick up on this role model aspect, or really the mentality behind entrepreneurship. You mentioned adaptive, your ability to adapt as being key, but there's another component behind it. You can argue it's, on the one hand, courage, perhaps also being afraid to take the first step, afraid to adapt. Whilst you were able to pull the plug on your business in the context of obviously pandemic and the crisis, therefore other businesses were not able to let go of their baby, so to speak. So that building up your mindset, adapting, how would you go about, firstly, considering that as university age, but also how important do you see it as really broadening your horizon to be a successful entrepreneur? Is that necessary to begin with?
I think adaptability is key for sure, because at the end of the day, we're an ever-changing world, right? So if we take a look at marketing, for example, look at the evolution of marketing over the last 10, 15, 20 years. We started off with TV ads, but now if you look at TV ads, what's bigger? Reels, TikToks, right? Short form content. Similar short form content, but again, quicker, faster, more captivating, again, depending on your audience. If we take a look at, leaflets or postcards versus what people are doing today, they're running ads on Facebook, pay-per-click, etc. Things have evolved, right? So if we don't evolve, how are we supposed to get better, right? So that aspect of adaptation is extremely important, but taking the first step and going back to the previous point, we're young. We don't have, and most of us don't have dependables right now. We don't have, little brothers or little sisters that need us as a source of income. We don't have a spouse or kids right now, which means it allows us to take these risks, because if we don't take the risks now, well, you're not going to do it when you're 35 years old and you have a family and you have kids and you need to put food on the table. Sure, you might, but the risk is a lot higher then. Whereas now, if you spend 2-3 years, I think of it as practice. So let's say hypothetically that the business did not take off. Over the last few years, I could put on a number of hands the different things that I've learned. Am I going to look back at that 2-3 years and say, well, you know what? I could have made this much money. And sure, like there's definitely that one way to look at it. But I also look at it as sharpening the tool to get that next position or to get that next step, and how much better I can now have that plan of attack, right? So it depends on your mindset and how you think of things. But ultimately, as anyone in university, you want to be able to really figure out that course of attack. But it's not going to come through day one or day two. It comes through those little steps. So the first step is, and if you're listening to this and you want to get into entrepreneurship, one, find a need. What is there a need in the market for? Number two, what's your biggest strength as an individual? Do people tell you that you're funny? Do people tell you that you have a really good sharp mind? Do people tell you that you're really relatable? Well, how can you use these different things? Maybe if you're really funny, how can you create content? How can you monetize on content? Well, if you're really adaptable and you have really good empathy, correction. Well, how can you build your sales skills? How can you build customer service? How can you look into HR roles? So understanding your strengths gives you an opportunity to, again, get that attack. But your first step is just start. Create a social handle. Buy the domain. Figure out your next 3 steps. Is it, I need to pick out a marketing plan. What's your ideal audience? Do I need to create a brand and a logo? Once you've done a number of stuff, what really happens is you've already invested time in a sunk cost that you're going to want to keep going. You've already put it out to your community that you're doing something, where now that community, right off the bat, acts as a source of accountability. So your first thing is putting out anything. It could be your first piece of content. It might not be your best piece of content, but putting out that first one now leads for you to put out a second one. And that second one will be way better than your first one, right? So think about it as your podcast when you guys first started and what it is now. The production, the setup, the backstage, the intro. Think about how many different components it probably came in where you guys have improved over time. Right?
No, I totally agree. The steps towards improvement, self-improvement in this case, is absolutely vital. And I think it's 2 aspects I want to dive into with you. One, time management, because I'm conscious of the fact you actually have a full-time job on top of your entrepreneurship activities. And the other aspect is the networking aspect. And some may want to call it also the cooling off part of your daily life schedule. Yeah. Why don't we start with the actual time management part first? I'd love to get your perspective on it.
Oh, I'm not great at time management because all I do is work. I wish I had more time to step back, but essentially, from university, I worked full-time, and I worked for Volkswagen for a year. I shifted out to Alberta for 5 months and did door-to-door sales. When I came back from Alberta, I took that year to travel. When I took that year to travel, I came back and I decided to start True Media. Now, when I started True Media, I had enough capital that I said, I'm not going to work a full-time job. I'm going to solely focus on building the company. So I spent about a year and a half putting everything into the company and got it to a point where now that I had such a great team, I was able to take a step back and actually work full time, but also manage, right? And this is what I'm talking about. Certain times you have to invest everything into it where you're spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week in order to get the result or to where you want to be. But once you've done that and you've built up these processes, then what you're able to do is take a step back, build the equity to fund your entrepreneur. So again, you need to be able to find the balance, but at the end of the day, time management is critically important. You need to be able to have a schedule, and I'm not saying that I don't, I do, but having the time of downtime, as long as you can find an hour for yourself or an hour and a half right before bed, or getting on the phone with your partner, whatever it might be, those are the little things in life that you got to hold on to and also do for yourself, because then you won't be able to take that next step if you don't, right? So for younger people, it could be going to the gym. It could be, like I said, getting on the phone with your partner. It could be, taking an hour to watch a Netflix series or whatever it might be. But that 1 hour, 2 hours is your time that you need to block off. No phones, no distractions. Now, on the other side, the networking plays into a role with this. Sales and marketing, all you're doing is you're networking on a constant basis. As an entrepreneur, you need to be able to understand sales because you're selling yourself on a day-to-day basis. That being said, in terms of networking, when I was doing the hospitality stuff in university from 2017 to 2021, all I did was network. I was the go-to guy where I was renting out clubs and hosting events, and you're having 300-400 people on a week-to-week basis. So people are learning who you are. You're getting your name out there. So I built that foundation very young. I've always been a people person. So me networking or just me going out with friends, and I'm the type of person, I'll mingle at a party. I'll go meet everybody, right? Like, you want to make your impact on people because they're going to go home and be like, wow, that Sunny guy's really great. Whereas if you ignore them and you're kind of standoffish, you're not going to want to build rapport. You're not going to want to care what they're doing, right? So the more that you care about someone else, the more they'll also care about you. The more effort you put into somebody else, the more effort they'll put into you. So I talk about this in sales, and it's called the law of reciprocity. So this is sales and marketing and how they combine. Dan, I want you to think of this. Let's say you're going out for dinner with someone, and you reach over and you grab the bill. What's the first thing that they do?
Argue with you because they want to pay their share as well.
Correct. They either pay their share or they grab the whole bill and say, this one's on me, right?
Sure.
At the end of the day, law of reciprocity, if I'm going to do something, they now want to do it. So same thing in marketing. If I am looking to build my social engagement, the more comments I give, 20, 30 comments a day, I'm now making that person feel more special. I'm paying attention to their content. So ultimately, I'm going to show up on their feed and they're going to interact with me because now we've built an online relationship. So again, what we're doing is we're building each other up. If I were to give a pen to somebody at the end of a sale, the odds of them coming back to me and me being in the decision process is about 20 to 30% higher, which now means even if I had a product or service, go ahead, sir.
No, I get your point. I would argue though, that's not always the case, right? We all know that one friend who takes a little bit more, that one business contact who always calls you when he needs something, but has always got something on when you need something. How do you deal with that kind of relationship? Do you cut them out? Or?
No, and this is what I'm saying. It comes down to authenticity. So it comes back to genuine care, because if they genuinely care about you, they will also do the same when you need them. So again, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. It needs to go both two ways, just like a social platform's value exchange. So essentially, if I'm not receiving value from that person, am I going to end up following them years later when I have no social contact with them? No. So again, how can it go both ways? And if it doesn't go both ways, well, then no problem. At least you've done your side, where now if that value or that need is still there in the future, they now have an opportunity to income. But if you were standoffish, are they going to want to approach you in general?
It's a lot to think about for our audience. And I think that very nicely leads to our next question. We always like to say 3-5 year plans. What can we expect from you? What's your plan for the next 5 years?
Great question. Build equity, build real estate portfolio. I think that's anything anyone wants to do that's, out of university, built a career. Now their next step is how can they build that real estate empire, right? So we know it's recession proof. We know that the cost of housing, especially here in Canada, has gone up almost 300 times in the last 10 years. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. A property that was $250,000 about 8 years ago is now $750K. So getting into real estate's essential, whether you want to build a family and do all that kind of stuff, but also, having those assets that can bring you money in, the short time. So I plan to keep doing sales. Sales is where I really have my passion, as well as entrepreneurship. Sales is something I will continue. I will continue to automate the business. Again, being adaptable, you can have a 3-year and 5-year plan of where you'd like to go and what you'd like to see and what you'd like to achieve. However, at the end of the day, when you are adaptable, you need to also understand that things can change in a sense, right? So you need to be open to feedback. If I'm doing the same thing I'm doing in 2 years from now, I didn't learn. So I need to be able to understand, take feedback from those around me in order to get better and do better tomorrow. So that's my answer.
Ambitious, but I quite like it. And on that point of real estate, I mean, obviously we have a very different landscape here in Europe. It is increasingly one of the generational differences between our generation and the ones before us, ultimately. And unfortunately, it's also a key part of some issues, or some people having issues with mental health as a result of that. I think it's an important aspect for us to consider, how to deal with your own mental health as you especially work so hard, work onto entrepreneurial track record as well as a commercial one. How do you deal with that on a personal level?
The mental health side of things? Great question. So mental health, everybody will face at some point in their life. That's just the reality of it. And essentially what you need to be able to do is allow yourself to go through that. There's no hack or walk around, but it's literally going through the emotions and going through the lows and the highs. And as an entrepreneur, you will have days where you are making $0 for months at a time. But there'll also be days where you're making more money than you could have seen in a month working for somebody. So going through those lows and highs, what you learn is you need to even kneel, and balancing your emotions comes down to understanding, well, if you're down, how long are you going to let yourself be down for? Next, what are the steps that can help build yourself? Is it you going to the gym? Is it you eating healthy? Is it you going to hang out with friends? What helps you tick, right? So when you are down, you can sit in your room and you can sit in your bed and self-loathe and self-pity, but for how long? And having that mindset of, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes. I'm going to give myself 1 hour. I'm going to give myself today, but use that day to figure out what your tomorrow looks like. And this is things that people will go on a day-to-day basis, and every day will be a battle for them. And that's very normal. Like I said, I think everybody goes through it, and everybody goes through it to at least a degree. But being able to check in on your peers is so important. So one of the things I used to do, and this was part of my routine in 2020, right when COVID started, was my goal was to text 5 people every single day. People I might not have even talked to for 6 months or 12 months, and tell them one thing I appreciate about them. Now think of, in that 1 month, how many people I impacted. Think of how much positivity I sent out and how much positivity was sent back. Now imagine what that does to your environment. Imagine what that does to your mood. Imagine what that does to your mindset. But that helps you get to that next day. That helps you get to that next step. That allows you to figure out your ambitions. That allows you to really, look back at what your why was. What makes you tick? Everyone knows what to do, but how many people know why they should do the things that they do?
I like this optimistic pragmatism almost to a degree. No, very inspiring. And look, the only question that we have left in our agenda is one that our audience always quite likes to hear, which is on the topic of literature. I hope at least within your time schedule you find a little bit of time for a nice book. Anything you'd recommend to us? Anything you're reading at the moment?
Probably my favorite book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This book is absolutely phenomenal, and it's a funny story. My father told me about it when I was really young, and I never got into it until I was much older. And it will still be a book, so I've read the book once, but now what I'll do is I use it as an audio book as well. And it's something that you listen to for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and the impact of your mindset really does shift. And it's all about sales and being the most authentic person, how to be the best version of you, because that best version ultimately is going to make those friends and to do the things that you want to do, right? So people want to be with people on their side. So have and be supportive of others, and you'll have that same support. So one of my favorite books by far. I highly recommend. If you haven't read it, you do read it. And yeah, hope it does wonders.
What a good note to end it on, I would say. Sonny, thanks so much for your time.